To our next panelist, and that is Larry Wahrenbrock, who moved to Nevada, Silver City, Nevada in 1973. He is from the Comstock. He has worked for Nevada Department of Fish and Game, Douglas County Planning, the Comstock Historic District Commission, and he has consulted with private firms and public agencies on environmental and historic preservation issues. So, we have Larry.
Thank you. I can generally talk pretty well too. I want to thank Plan for doing this and everybody on the panel for coming to be part of it, because I think it's an extraordinary opportunity to address an issue that I've lived with for 35 years, 40 years. Mining companies are big, they're powerful, they're bullies, and they can affect the community in extremely harsh ways, and so I got involved as being a resident of Silver City at the time. Silver City only had 75, 80 people in it, but in 1986 a mining company called Nevex Gold came to town on private land, so they did not need any federal permitting, and proposed to do an open pit mine that would be essentially within the town limits of Silver City, on the edge, but within the town limits and a little bit on the outside of the town limits. I've always considered myself a responsible citizen, and as part of that responsibility means being active in issues that affect your community. So everybody in town felt that this would not be a good idea to have a huge open pit mine in town. And so we set out to defeat their application. Fortunately, they needed to apply to our local county for a master plan amendment, a zone change, and a special use permit. So there were actually three things that they had to accomplish through our local jurisdiction in order to put their mine in action. Any one of those would stymie the project and cause it to fail. So we got together, we garnered our resources. You form alliances, you learn who the players are, you get to know your enemy as well as your friends, and you try and broaden your perspective as much as you can, particularly among your friends. We spent about 30 grand cash out of pocket to prepare an answer to the report that the mining company submitted to Lyon County. That meant going to experts. That's how I met Glenn Miller originally. That's how I met Bob Fulkerson originally, Guy Rocha originally, as well as other people, Gene Lydell from the university and the economics. You can't just go with your gut. You got to go with facts. So you get all those people together. Just kind of as a sidebar, after it was all said and done, and we actually defeated the mining company, we won the Citizen Participation and Planning Award from the American Planning Association as a result of our efforts, which was. You don't get very many pats on your back when you do this kind of stuff. Mostly you get called eco-terrorists or something else. But it was kind of gratifying to get a pat on the back from a professional organization that saw how citizens could prevail. The arguments that we made that caused us to prevail was that the economic benefit of the mining operation would not balance the loss of integrity that the historic district would suffer. The loss in property value to nearby residential owners would not be balanced by any economic gain purported by the mining company. The degradation of the quality of life enjoyed by the current residents would be significant, and there was nothing the mining company could do to mitigate that. And the proposed mitigation of any adverse impacts identified by the mining company were either inadequate or not addressed in the company's application at all. All these factors, combined with the language in the Lyon County Master Plan and the zoning ordinances, laid the foundation and the justification for those public officials to say no. It's real easy to say yes when you're a public official, but when you say no, you have to provide significant justification. So I played a role in all of that. Actually, at the time, I acted as a coordinator for all of that, and we were successful. But I'm here today to give you some insight about how a community effort can be successful when facing the potential impacts. And I'd like to look to the future too. And I want to specifically say that I'm not anti-mining, and I'm not opposed to economic development and job creation. I am opposed to open pit mining adjacent to residential communities. I'm opposed to open pit mining in the National Landmark Historic District, and I'm opposed to corporate activities being subsidized by taxpaying citizens, and I'm opposed to extractive industries not paying their fair share. So a mining company will have an economic impact by creating some jobs. They'll have ancillary economic impacts by purchasing goods and outside services. They will provide some tax revenue to the local and the state. And they will provide corporate revenue. But because of basically the international nature of the mining industry right now, that corporate revenue goes out of the state and often out of the country. General impacts, extractive industries are short-term and finite in duration. They generally follow a pattern of high initial outlay for site development and infrastructure construction, providing temporary employment for many trades and professions during that startup period, and then they settle into a scaled down employment level for the operational and close down phase of their operation. The following impacts, you can read both in positive and negative. There'll be increased enrollment in your public school system. There'll be increased demand on electrical power and increased demand on water resources. There'll be an increased demand for housing. There'll be increased traffic and heavy equipment transport. There'll be a demand on your emergency services, your fire, emergency medical, hazardous and toxic waste materials, and there'll be an increased demand in local law enforcement. You'll also see an increase in some charitable contributions, and you'll see an increased demand on medical providers. As far as environmental impacts go, open pit mining produces uncommon levels of noise. If you haven't ever visited an open pit mine, please do so. Open pit mining degrades air quality, especially by increasing particulates and fugitive dust. Open pit mines permanently scar the landscape and have very little, if any, potential for productive post-mining use. The processing facilities for open pit mines are toxic sites while in operation and present uncommon safety issues. Open pit mines have high levels of fuel consumption. So mining companies, this is a phrase that we used over and over again in our fight, and it still holds true today. They promise the moon, but they usually deliver little more than a moon beam. The mining is a classic boom and bust business model. Corporations are created for the economic benefit of stockholders and to provide a shield of legal liability. And that's their only purpose. Mining companies are no different. Often the legal structure of a proposed mining venture is a convoluted structure involving multiple corporate identities, joint ventures, partnerships, LLCs, leaseholders with production royalties, and a host of other legal entanglements regarding ownership and legal responsibility. When faced with such a complicated mess, it's often beyond the ability of the average citizen to determine exactly who they're dealing with. That is, who can actually enter into a binding agreement or what the resources of the company truly are. Buy stock. I loved it when you said that. We always buy stock in a company that comes in. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 shares. Buy the stock. Anyway, as a result, even when the bonds are posted and performance guarantees are made, the permits are issued with stringent conditions. If and when there's a significant monetary glitch for the company, All those people are gonna disappear, those corporate identities are gonna evaporate or become hollow, and the legal entanglements are gonna remain. The reality is that no matter what economic gains may be realized by a mining venture, there will always be a significant long-term loss. This is an extractive industry. It's rape, pillage, and plunder. For communities and their residents, the recovery from those losses is rarely achieved. Yerington is trying to recover now from a mine that closed 30 years ago.
1978.
Yeah.
Conner.
Anaconda closed 30 years ago. They still don't know what to do with it and how to cope. What can we do and how can we do it better in the future? The mining industry needs to modernize their socio-cultural methodology just as they have their production methodology. By this I mean that over the past 3 or so decades, the mining industry has increased efficiencies through the design and introduction of new equipment, new chemistry for higher recovery rates, new mine development and extraction models, as well as new exploration technologies for the ore body identification and evaluation. They have been less successful in mitigating their environmental impacts, and even less than that in ameliorating their socio-cultural impacts. Environmental degradation needs to be evaluated in economic terms and be recognized and mitigated as a cost of doing business. The socio-cultural impacts need to be fully recognized, identified, and mitigated. Analyses of these kinds are neither easy or straightforward. Some of the questions are going to come up is the historic preservation of a structure or site, or is the efficient placement of mine spoils, the avoidance of an archaeological resource, or the value of the minerals that lie beneath it, the protection of air and water resources, or the immediate economic benefit of job creation, the quality of life experienced by a community, or the disruption of that community in favor of a mining company's profits. Short-term losses, or long-term losses, or short-term gains. You can see that this space makes a dilemma. The multitude of non-renewable resources competing for value within a capitalist framework that isn't used to identifying those non-renewable resources. It's essential that these parameters are included in any discussion. But what can we do? We have options, and I would suggest a couple of three to start with. As Guy said, the joint resolution, we need to support that. But I would like to see a production tax or royalty on the value of extracted mineral products payable to the state with a distributive formula so that the county of origin receives a viable proportion. It's not a new concept, and it's not an uncommon concept in other states. They need to pay their fair share. There also needs to create a standardized comprehensive review process on a local as well as a state level. It kind of is on a federal level, but not on a local or state level. The current process for review is cumbersome for the industry, and it often does not include meaningful input by local authorities or the general public. Provide a mechanism for better communication and coordination between agencies with permitting authorities. The current process involves numerous agencies with review authority that is narrow and often fails to recognize the effect of one permitted activity may have on another. And cumulative effects are rarely considered, and they are often significant. And often mining projects start out small, and then they build and they grow. From a community activist and a citizens activist perspective, I'd like to leave you with what I call the P's. Public policy is driven by public opinion. Be positive. Develop a proactive stance regarding your issue. Do not ignore the other side. Do not denigrate their position or make personal attacks. Reasonable people can disagree about issues. Simply make your argument the best. Be practical. Know what you're getting into. Assess what you can effectively accomplish on your own and determine where you're going to need outside help. Get to know all the people involved, citizens, regulators, business people, other organizations, no matter what side of the issue they represent. Be persistent. To be truly effective in the political arena, you need to be the first one there and the last one to leave. You can't leave anything to chance. Use persuasion. Develop your message. Make it simple, frame your argument in clear and common sense language, and then distribute your message far and wide with conviction and enthusiasm. Stick to your principles. Base your position on a sound, honest parameters and stick to them. Have patience. Whether it's at a local political stage, the gathering of information from outside sources, gaining national or regional allies, contacting the press, or whatever, things don't happen overnight. It took 30 years to change the eminent domain law. I testified in 1981. This last year was a bellwether. It was just amazing the way the argument was formulated, the way the sides had changed, and how they came together to defeat the industry with eminent domain, which I thought in 1981 was absolutely atrocious. How could anybody think anything else? And yet it persisted for 30 years or more, 35 years, until this last session of the legislature. And with that, I thank you, and I thank PLAN, and all citizen activists on whatever issue.